Hello everyone, and welcome back to the garage. Today we're going to be looking at a pretty popular and special machine, a Gottlieb haunted house from 1982. I picked up this machine not too long ago and it needs an absolute ton of work. So let's go ahead and take a look at this thing and see what we can do to get it up and running properly again. And so here is our haunted house from 1982. You can see the back glass is in very nice shape. No severe paint flaking or wear. It is missing a couple of the back glass protectors. This machine has metal protectors. You can see the one on the right side there, but it's missing the one on the top and the one on the left side. And you can see a little bit of wear right there where the protector would be, but once I get a replacement set of protectors, that wear won't be visible anymore, and it'll look a lot better once those are installed. So the back glass is in pretty nice shape. Here's what the playfield looks like. Playfield is all right, but I can tell it's had a lot of love over the years because there's plenty of little wear spots around it, like right there, around the clear plastic window. There's some wear around that. And you can see there's a lot of ball swirls in the paint, so it hasn't been cleaned on a regular basis. And up here, we got a pretty severe wear point from that center kicker right there, from where the ball pops out and lands. And up here by the kick out that pops it up into the upper playfield, you can see some wear where that has been landing over the years. The upper playfield's actually pretty nice because it has some mylar over it, so it's been protected. There's a little bit of mylar down by the pop bumper here that's starting to peel, so I'm not really sure what I'm going to do about that. I'm probably going to leave it alone. But the bumpers, they have little plastic protectors around them. I'm going to have to replace them because they're in terrible shape. And if we look at one of the bumpers on the main playfield, you can see there's a lot of wear under it, plus the protector has been cut. So it's no longer round, so I'm going to have to get a new one for that one. And down here, there's also some pretty severe wear, and that's pretty typical for a pop bumper, but the protective covering is kind of dirty and it could really just use a new set. So I'm going to replace those. The lower playfield we'll take a better look at when I open up the machine, but you can see it's still got the clear plastic spider web that sits on the top of it, so that hasn't gone missing. The lower playfield, you can see, is pretty worn. It's got some spots there from where the ball falls down. And up here, it's kind of hard to see with the glare. But there's some wear spots kind of up in this area too. There's a post missing. I can see that there. One of the drop targets down in the basement broke, so they don't reset properly anymore. So the machine definitely needs some love and attention and cleaning. And that's exactly what we're going to give it. In terms of the plastics, most of them are okay. They look all right, but there are some that are developing cracks, like the one up here. There's supposed to be a split in this one here, but you can see that's starting to crack right at the edge of that split. This plastic here for the secret passage is supposed to go all the way out to here, so it's had a big piece break off. The ones up here I think are okay, but there's at least 3 or 4 plastics that are either missing pieces or they're starting to crack, so I'm going to have to find some replacements for that. But all in all, not the worst playfield I've ever seen. It is certainly going to be a lot better by the time I am done with this game. Here's the front of the cabinet. You can see it's in pretty nice shape. The coin door is not really bent very much down by the coin return. It's got a little bit of a bend in it, but I can probably pound that back out. It's missing the door, so I'll have to find a coin return door, and I'll have to replace the sticker. But the cabinet paint is very nice. And I think the legs on this machine have been replaced as well because they are looking quite good. Same with the leg levelers. And it's actually got the correct legs because Haunted House, the back legs are a lot taller than the front legs, and it's got the tall legs on the back. So whoever replaced the legs on this machine put the correct ones on, so that is nice. I don't have to deal with that. And I have this machine kind of tucked into its spot, but you can still see the side of the cabinet is pretty good. There's a little bit of scratching, but it's not major. It looks pretty nice still. Same with up here. You can see I actually do have the keys with this machine. Way too often I get machines and they don't have the keys. This one is not one of them, so I don't have to drill out any locks. This side of the cabinet is also pretty good. Typical wear for a machine of this age. A little bit more wear up there, but it's definitely not the worst I've ever seen. And this machine will look better once I clean it up and give it some attention. And this machine does come to life. If I go ahead and turn it on here, you can see the displays come up and all of the general illumination and Playfield lights are working. You can see that the back glass is doing a little lightning effect, and that is controlled by a little board behind the back box. So that's working fine. And as it is right now, this machine has both a NeWumpf System 80 CPU board and driver board installed, but I did receive the original Gottlieb CPU board, and I can tell it's had some rework done. Some of the chips on it have been socketed. Some of the parts over here have been removed, so I think this was a parts board at some point. It's got replacement ROMs in little adapter boards, so I don't think these are original. The battery has been removed and it was converted to NVRAM. That's a good change. And I think one of these dip switch banks has been replaced. So this board has had a lot of work done, but when we get farther along and get the machine as it is working completely, then we'll go ahead and do a repair on the original CPU board and get that working as well. So got some stuff to work on with this game. And the machine does start. If I go ahead and push the start button, it comes to life. The bottom drop targets tried to reset but couldn't because one of them's broken and it's making the mechanism catch. So those don't reset right. These upper drop targets don't work. I've never seen them reset. The right flippers don't work. If I push the button, they don't do anything. The ones on the left do, but if I push the second buttons on the back, you can see the two upper flippers are working and the two lower ones work as well. So I have to figure out why these flippers aren't working, but I'll go ahead and just see how it plays here. And there's also quite a few switches that aren't working, I've noticed. Like one of the pop bumpers on the main Playfield doesn't work. So we'll have to take a look at all that. The coil for the trapdoor, which is behind the ramp here, it doesn't work. And I'll see if I can show that. Be in the main Playfield to show that, because there's a certain switch that opens that up. I'll show that when I have the glass off. But you can see the machine is trying to work. The boards seem like they're fine. That pop bumper's working. Unfortunately, I can't use the flippers to save that ball. So yeah, you can see the core functionality of this machine is working just fine, but it's definitely going to need some work. I think it is this pop bumper here that doesn't work at all when you hit the switch, so we'll have to take a look underneath there and see what's going on. But the trapdoor coil back here, if you roll down this switch behind the bumper, it will lower the trapdoor, but it doesn't actually do it. It just kind of buzzes and doesn't lower the door all the way. So I'll have to take a look and see, maybe the coil's bad, maybe there's a bad diode, I'm not really sure. what would be causing that, but we'll figure it out. We'll get all the problems sorted with this machine like we always do. So I think now we'll go ahead and we'll shut this off so that the attract mode sounds don't interrupt me when I'm talking. And we'll take a look behind the back glass and underneath the playfield, and I'll show you what the condition of this machine is like. So that is what it looks like back here. You can see the previous owners put a lot of LEDs in this machine. I'll probably end up changing those out to suit my preferences, but there are still some incandescent bulbs back here and even a couple 455s, which I will probably leave if I think they're in a good spot. The displays are all here. And originally, when I first got this machine, the 4-digit credit and ball and play display was missing its little green cover. And I couldn't find any on any Pinball Parts website. So what I did is I sent off an email to the Pinball resource and asked them if they had any green covers for the 4-digit display just hanging around. And they had some used ones, so I bought one and I installed it on the display here. And so now they all have their covers. So I've kind of already solved one problem, but I thought it was amazing that Pinball Resource still had an original Gottlieb display cover for that. The main displays all have their covers, and they are all in nice shape. When I first had this machine on, some of the displays weren't showing characters quite right, and so what I did is I just removed the connector here and put it back in, and that seems to have fixed it. When I start getting into this machine, I'll probably end up spraying some contact cleaner inside these connectors just to make sure that they will be perfectly fine. So the backboard in this machine is in pretty good shape. I do notice some burn marks. You will see this on machines that have been turned on for long periods of time with their original incandescent bulbs. They, over time, will generate enough heat to actually discolor the backboard like this. So that's not a problem. It's just something to note when you're back behind the machine fixing it up. So that's what it looks like back here. And on a System 80 machine, to get behind the backboard, you have to pull up a little bit on the backboard like that, and then it will swing on a hinge out this way. And so here's what behind the back box looks like. Right there we have our NeWumpf CPU board. Down here we have our NeWumpf driver board. And I did not receive the original driver board of this machine. I might try to track one down on eBay just for originality's sake, but this board works exactly the same as the original, so I don't have to replace it. But I would like to get the original CPU board back in just to have the original Gottlieb code running on this machine. Up here we have our original Gottlieb power supply. And down here we have our soundboard, which is also original. So it's nice those are still original. I can service those and get them working. And there is behind the backboard. Looks to be in good shape. This is the little board that controls that lightning effect on the back glass. You can see we have some driver transistors for those lights and a little bit of other logic. So it's a pretty simple board, but without that, you wouldn't get the lightning effect. But I did notice this board when I was back here, and I'm not really sure what it's for because I've never seen that board on other pictures of haunted houses. And it is right above one of the original mounts for the original CPU board. And so I'm not really sure why that's there. I didn't see a connector for it in the wire harness. So if any of you recognize that board, go ahead and let me know what that's for. It looks like it's an original Gottlieb board, but I'm not sure what that does. And the previous owner was nice enough to label all of the connectors for me. So when I got this machine in, I was able to plug all the connectors back in pretty quickly. You can see some of them still have their original Gottlieb label, but a lot of them have lost their original label, so I'm glad that they've been relabeled because it made putting this back box together a lot easier. So that's what it looks like back here. It's pretty nice. It's definitely going to need a clean out. You can see we got some dirt on the bottom of it, and I've noticed that the hinge and the little track that the backboard rides on is pretty stiff. It doesn't want to move very easy, so I'll probably grease that up, clean it up, and then that should feel a lot better. So, pretty nice condition back here. Let's go ahead and take a look underneath the playfield. Foam on this lockdown bar absolutely needs to be replaced. So with the glass off, we can take a better look at the main playfield. You can see it's all right. It has the typical wear from a heavily used machine, but it's really not too horrible. I noticed that this plastic right here is going to have to be replaced because it's got a big chunk of it missing. I imagine it's supposed to go kind of out to here. So to find a new one for that one. The basement plastic down here, I'll show that when we open up the playfield. It needs to be replaced because there's a big chunk of it missing. It should go out to around there. So that's another one that's going to have to be replaced. And this one up here also has a big chunk missing. So I'm going to have to be on the hunt for some Gottlieb Haunted House plastics to replace those broken ones. But let's go ahead and take a look underneath the playfield, and I'll show you what the basement looks like. So this is what the underside of the Gottlieb Haunted House playfield looks like. And this is the basement playfield, and we can take a better look at it now. You can see the plastic spiderweb cover is still here. It's held in by these little metal tabs on each side, so you have to bend this piece of plastic a little bit to clear the tabs on one side if you want to remove it. And if we look down here, you can see more clearly the broken plastic, the missing post, the broken drop target that's there, and there's a pretty big wear spot right there. So this game has definitely seen a lot of hours, and I may end up replacing this bottom playfield just to make it look nicer, but that'll be something for a much later time if I even do that. And then the underside of the main playfield looks to be in good shape. There's a display mounted right there for your bonus that you accumulate when you're underneath the playfield. So that is how that is mounted. And the bottom playfield does lift out as well. I'll go ahead and show the underneath of that here in a minute. But down here is where I noticed a problem. And when I was testing this machine earlier, I was going through the solenoid test, and it fired about 3 solenoids before everything just stopped working. The sounds quit working, and the solenoids quit working. The lamps were fine, and so my first thought was, well, did a fuse blow? Well, I looked under here where the power capacitors are, and I think these have been replaced, which is good. The fuses are all right there, and it was fuse F4, so it's the 4th fuse down that blew. And so I replaced it, I put a new fuse in there, and that restored the sounds and the solenoids. But what I think the issue was right here. This is the knocker coil, and you can see how the paper surround is missing. Well, that's a clue that that coil has probably gotten very hot, and so I think that coil might be shorted. And if the machine tried to fire that coil and it was shorted, then it would absolutely blow the fuse and kill the solenoids. And if we take a look at the windings on that coil, the middle part of it definitely looks a little darker. And I think those windings should be bright red. So I think the coil might be shorted. Maybe the diode down there is shorted. So I'll take this out and desolder the coil and measure it to see if it is shorted. And if it is, then I'll have to replace it. And on this machine, if you want to access the power cord and the main power transformers, they are located all the way in the back. back there. So we have our two transformers, and the power cord is soldered somewhere back there. And you can see the sheer amount of wiring this machine has because of how complex it is. Triple Playfield machine. So I'll go ahead and lift this Playfield up and I'll show you what it looks like underneath that. And so for the bottom Playfield here, you're supposed to remove that. Originally there would have been a couple screws here that held it in. So I'm going to have to find some replacements for that. But it cannot rest using a metal arm like this. There's no second arm underneath it. So you either have to prop it up somehow or just hold it up. And so what you do after you remove the two screws that would have been here is it just slides forward, and you have to pull it out far enough. And so once you get it out far enough, then you can go ahead and just prop it up. I'm not really sure how far it pulls because I've never worked on a machine with the lower Playfield, but you can go ahead and pull it out and just kind of lean it up. I imagine it'll pull out far enough to where you can lean it. Well, I can tell you that this Playfield is easily removable because it's only got one section of a wire harness attached to it, and it looks like it's only two connectors. So if I remove those, then I can just pull the Playfield right out, but you can kind of see the inner workings of the underneath of the Playfield right there. We have some coils for different things. We have the drop targets right there, and you can see it's just basically a mini version of the main Playfield. So we'll have to do some work down here eventually to get the drop targets replaced and take everything apart and do rubbers and LEDs and all that good stuff. So that is what the mini Playfield looks like. And to put it back, you just put it back down and slide it in. There's a couple little grooves in the back that it will slide into, just like these two grooves here. And then you put the screws back in, and that's that. So that is how the lower Playfield works on a haunted house. So let's go ahead and start fixing all of this machine's problems. The first thing I want to fix is the right flippers on the main Playfield. I want to see why those don't do anything when you push the front right button for the flippers. And we can see here that the switch is making contact, so we don't have a problem with that switch. So the next thing we need to look at is the flipper mechanisms. And so these are the two flipper mechanisms for the two right flippers on the main Playfield, and I already see the problem. If we take a look at this one, this diode is supposed to go across the two edge points of the coil, but it's not connected on one side. So the circuit is basically open. And I checked the diode on this one, and it is still connected on both sides. So I'm going to go ahead and solder that diode back in, and we'll see if that fixes the problem. All right, I went ahead and soldered the diode back on, and before I did, I checked it with my meter just to make sure it was still okay, and it was. So with that back in, let's start it up and see if the flippers work. Nope, they don't. So while that was a problem, that was not the only problem. But while I have the machine running, I also want to show you the trapdoor problem. So right now, if you were to shoot the ball through the switch here, it would go around the ramp and back out. But if you roll through this lane right here, it'll cause this little metal flap to flip down, and the ball, if you were to shoot through here, it would drop down the hole and go into the basement. So I'm going to roll over this switch and watch what it does. It doesn't have any more strength to go down than that. You can see what the problem is. The coil isn't able to hold it down all the way. And so that's another problem we're going to have to fix. But we'll take a look at that after we figure out why the flippers aren't working. So what we'll go ahead and do for this is we'll take a look at the wiring diagram, and we'll take a look at the circuit for the flippers and see what we can find that is maybe causing the right flippers not to work. And I have verified that the switch itself is not the problem. I went ahead and hooked up some clip leads to each end of the switch, and I have it hooked up to a little ohm meter, and if I push the button, you can see it registers a connection. So the switch itself is not the problem. So if we take a look at the schematics on page 39, it shows how the flippers are wired up in this machine. So this is a connector here. It's connector A12P8, and different numbers here correspond to different pins on the connector. But if we look at pins 10 and 13, those are attached to the left and right flipper switches. And you can see it says red, and then up here we have flipper switch green, right and left. That's because the flipper buttons, the main ones are red and the rear ones are green. So that's what that means. And if we take a look at those two switches, the red left and the red right, you can see they are attached through a switch on the Q relay and the switch on the T relay. And if you're wondering, Gottlieb, throughout System 1, System 80, and System 3, all of their solid-state systems, they still had a couple electromechanical style relays in them, and so that is what those two relays are, Q and T. Those are two electromechanical relays inside the machine. And from this pin, pin 5, you can see it is attached to 38 volts DC. So when these two switches are closed, the Q relay, I know just from experience, is the game over relay, and this switch will close when you start the game, and that will provide power to your flippers. So as long as these two switches are closed, the flipper switches have 38 volts going through them, and when you push the button, that will complete the circuit and cause the flippers to fire. But if we look up here, you can see we have a flipper switch return red right. Notice how it doesn't say red left and red right. So we have separate flipper returns for every one of the flippers. You can see here we have switch return red left, and then up here we have flipper switch return green left and right. And we have multiple different ones because there are flippers on the upstairs playfield, the main playfield, and then down here we have lower playfield flipper switches right there. So we're going to look on the main playfield, and so the ones we're looking for are right here, the bottom right flipper and the top right flipper. And so this one will be the bottom right, and this one is the top right. And because they're both not working, that means we can rule out the coil and the diode for each one as being the problem, because say the coil on the bottom right flipper was the problem, then the top right flipper will still work because it uses two separate coils and two separate diodes mounted to those coils. So we know the problem is after these two flipper switches. These are the end of stroke switches on the two flippers, and those are normally closed. And so once the flipper goes up all the way, then those end of stroke switches open, and I'll show you what those look like here in a minute. But you can see right here, this is the point where those two flippers are joined. And the only thing that is common with both the top right and the bottom right flipper is a switch on the U relay, because then it goes right back to the board through the flipper switch return on the right for the red button. So I believe our problem is the switch right here on the U relay is not being closed when it's supposed to and breaking the circuit for the flippers, and that's why they're not working. Because if we look at the flipper switch return for the left red button, you can see it's a different switch. It's marked with a different number. So we need to take a look at this switch on the mechanical U relay inside the machine and see if it needs to be adjusted. So for this one, we got to put the playfield all the way up in the service position because the electromechanical relays are right down here in the corner. So you can see we have the Q relay, the T relay, and the U relay. So we need to take a look at that U relay and see if there's a switch on it that needs to be adjusted. Well, I've been looking at the switches on that U relay, and it seems like every one of them is adjusted just fine. So I don't think the problem is on the U relay. So the only other thing it could be is the connection from this switch to pin 6 on the connector A12P8, there might not be a connection between here and here. The connection might be open. And if we go to page 41, actually page 42, if we look right here, we have connector A12J8, and that is the other end of that connector. And the one we're looking for is pin 6. That was the one we saw on the other page. So this is the return line, and it goes through this switch here. That is the flipper switch right here. So when the flipper switch gets pressed, it joins together pins 6 and 13. And if we look at pin 13 on the other end, back on page 39, that is the wire that is getting the 38 volts off of pin 5 when these two relay switches close. So that's the only other thing it could be. The connection between this switch back out to the flipper switch, because we tested this switch inside the machine. This is the button right here, and it was fine. So the connection must not be making it back from pin 6 to that switch. So I'm going to go ahead and take a look at that and see what I find. So I found the connector, and it's in a kind of a bad spot. It's all the way back here. It's this one right here. You can see A12J8, A12P8. So this is the connector with that wire that I think is having the problem. So I'm going to disconnect that and take a look at pins 6 and 13, and I'll see what I find. So here's what I'm going to do for testing. The wires for the flipper switch, these two right here, they go directly to that connector in the back. And so I'm going to be testing with an ohm meter to see if I get continuity with pin 6. And if I get continuity with that, then I know pin 6 is good. And I'm going to be doing the same with pin 13, because the pin on J8, pin 13, has a direct connection to the flipper switch, and the same with pin 6, like I just said. So I'm going to test that, and we're going to see if I get continuity between the flipper switch and J8, and that will rule out one side of the connector. All right, I've ruled out one side of the connector as having problems. So what I did, I hooked up a clip lead to one of these wires, and then ran another lead down and probed the wires of that part of the connector right there. And I found continuity doing that with both of the switch wires. So that is the J8 side. So we can rule out pins 6 and 13 on this side of the connector, and this complete path between them as being the problem. Those two are just fine. Now I want to check the P8 side. So the P8 side is the side that is connected to the U relay. So right now I have my black clip lead hooked onto one of the wires for that. And what I'm going to do is take my red clip lead, and I'm going to go back here and pick up the P8 side of the connector. And you can see the needle on my meter there. It will deflect all the way to the right when there is continuity. So I am going to probe, I think it's this pin here. There it is. So we have continuity between that wire and the pin on the connector that it goes to. So that's not the problem. Now I'm going to go to the other one. Okay, I've put my clip lead on the other wire for that switch. So for this next test, what we need to do is go up to the side of the coil where the banded end of the diode is on the flipper, and I can see where that's at. So watch the meter. I'm going to go ahead and touch it, and we have continuity. I need to take a look at this U relay and look at that switch. I might as well go ahead and just pull the whole relay bank out so I can get to it, and then adjust it, and then that should fix the flippers. All right, so I have the relay bank out kind of just hanging right there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to trick the machine into thinking there's a ball in the trough so I can start it. And what that'll do is it'll make the Q relay pull in, which provides the 38 volts to the flippers. So I'm gonna do that here real quick. Okay, you saw that relay pull in, and so now the main flippers have power. And I'm just gonna make sure that the ones on the right still don't work. What I'm gonna do is put some pressure on the switch that I think is the problem on this relay, the U relay, because if I push the U relay in, see what it does? It makes the basement general illumination come on, and the lights that shine down onto it from the main playfield, that's what this does. And it also provides the power to the two flippers down here. But what I need to do is look at this switch here, and I'm going to put some pressure on it. Let's see if they work now. No. Well, let me go ahead and clean it. Maybe it's just so dirty there's no connection. Well, it shows continuity, and if I go ahead and push it down, we don't have continuity, so the switch is working. I don't know if it was working before because I already went ahead and cleaned it. Let's go ahead and test it. Okay, I'll go ahead and start it again. Okay, see if they work. They don't. Well, that's weird. The ones on the left still work. I'm gonna have to take a look at the diagram because I must be missing something, because this seems like a very simple problem that can be solved relatively quickly. So I'm looking at the schematic again, and the only other thing it could possibly be is that the connection from pin 13 on the P8 side of the connector is not making its way down to the switch on the Q relay right here, because we know that these two switches are working because they're both connected to the left side also, and that side is fine. So if the connection was broken between here and there, that would cause the right flippers not to work. So let me investigate that. So I found the wire that goes to the Q relay and have my clip lead attached to it. And now I'm going to go probe pin 13 of the P8 side of that connector, and let's see if we get something. Well, it would help if I connected the negative side up to the voltmeter lead. That would help immensely. And we're getting connection. So I don't know what the problem is. That's insane. Everything's checking out, but we still have no flipper. All right, I've been doing a little bit more testing, and I figured out that the right flippers themselves are actually good. The coils and the diodes on the flipper mechanisms are just fine. So what I'm doing here is I am bridging the left red flipper button, because I know it's working correctly, to the wires on the right side. And so I have my red clip lead hooked up between the two. And if I go ahead and hook the black clip lead up to the other connection on this side, watch the right flipper mechanisms. They work. So the problem is not the flippers themselves. Okay, I have figured out why the flippers on the right side of the main playfield aren't working. So what I did is I took my voltmeter and I measured the voltage across both ends of the left main flipper switch and got around 40 volts, which is what we need for the flippers to fire. I did the same thing for the right button and got 0 volts. So we're not even getting power to the switch here. And so, of course, when you press it, it's not going to do anything because we don't have power. So why would we not have power? Because if we take a look at the schematic, you can see that the red left and the red right flipper switches, they are joined together and they both meet at this switch on the Q relay. And you can see this line is connected directly to the 38 volts DC source. So we should be getting power to both switches, but we're only getting power on the left side. And so I wanted to see on which side of the connector we weren't getting our power from. So what I did is I disconnected the connector A12P8, and I measured continuity between this side of that Q relay switch to pin 13 on that connector, and I got continuity. So the connection between here and pin 13 is fine. But if we flip over a couple pages, we can take a look at the other side of the connector, which is this one. And so there's the switch right there, and you can see it comes through to pin 13. Well, I measured from this side of this red flipper switch on the right, and I did not get continuity at pin 13. I got continuity on pin 12. And pin 12 is the switch return line, and if we follow that, that is for the left green flipper switch. So we have a wiring problem in this machine, and I know someone was messing with the wiring because when I was looking through the bottom of the machine, I went ahead and removed the lower playfield just so I had some more room, and I might as well leave it out at this point so I can work on it. But when I was looking in the bottom of the machine, I found some things, and one thing I found was this. This is one of the metal connectors that a wire goes into, and it goes into these type of connectors. So someone has been messing with the wiring in this machine and made a mistake when rewiring the connector for A12J8. That is that connector right there. This one has continuity in the right spot. This is the P8 side. So what I need to do is a very lengthy test to measure continuity between every pin on the J8 side of that connector, because there's probably at least one more wire on that connector that is also in the wrong spot. And if you take a look at the J8 side of the connector here, you can see that it has all 13 wires in the connector. And I've been able to figure out the pin out of that just by messing around with it. So the way this is wired is this bottom left corner here is pin 1, and it goes up. So it goes 1, 2, 3, and then the next row, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. And so I'm getting continuity on this top pin, but I should be getting it here. So that is why the right flippers aren't working. So let me show you what I need to do to figure out where the other wiring mistake is. So what I need to do is I need to check for continuity between every pin in this connector to where it is supposed to go in the schematic. So for example, pin 10, I need to measure continuity between that pin and follow it back to right here, A12J7 pin 6. And if I get continuity between those 2 points, I know that pin 10 on this connector is wired to the correct place. And so I need to do that for every pin on that connector so I can figure out which other wire is in the wrong spot. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what I find. All right, I have went through and I have found all of the mistakes on that connector. And I actually misspoke when I said pin 13 was connected up to pin 12. It was actually connected to pin 10. So that one was wired up incorrectly. And so I went through that connector and I marked all of the pins with a check mark that were wired up correctly. So as you can see, most of them, but I found 2 wiring mistakes. Pins 11 and 12 need to be swapped. They're in the wrong spot. And pins 10 and 13 need to be swapped. But I went through the diagram, and that mistake is actually very easy to make if you're not measuring for continuity, because pins 10 and 13 are the same wire color, and so are pins 11 and 12. So that's actually a simple mistake to make, and so that's why you need to measure continuity when you repin a connector so that you know for sure that everything's connected up in the right spot. Because had one of the power lines, say the plus 38 volts DC, was connected to the wrong spot, that would have absolutely destroyed stuff. But fortunately, we got lucky. It was just some switch return and switch line pins that were in the wrong spot. So I need to go to that connector and swap those 4 wires around. Well, I went ahead and swapped all those wires over, but when I went ahead and tested it, I had the opposite problem. The right side was working, but then the left side was not working. So I was like, what is going on with this game? So I put those wires back in the original position. So we're back where we started. The left flippers are working, the right aren't. And I just looked at everything. I looked at the ground bus down here, that looks fine. I looked at the wiring in these connectors, which come from the left side flipper switches. Those are fine, all the switches are fine, so I didn't know what the deal was. And so at this point, I was thinking there had to be some sort of missing wire. And so while I was looking around the machine, I wanted to follow where exactly pin 13 and pin 10 on the P8 side of this connector were going. Well, I figured out they go to these two fuses here. And this is where I got stumped, because these two fuses, F10 and F11, they are for the two pop bumpers on the main playfield. And if you remember, one of those pop bumpers I said was not working. And I figured out that these three wires right here, they have the same color code as the wires coming from that connector. And so I measured continuity from the P8 side of the connector back to this, and I got continuity. So I know these are the same wires. And both of these fuses have 38 volts DC across them for the pop bumpers, which is exactly what the flippers use. And so I thought, maybe there's something in common between the bumper fuses and the flippers. Well, I went ahead and found where fuses F10 and F11 were in the schematic. They're right there, and you can see they both go to plus 38 volts DC. So they're supposed to be connected together on that one side where we have the wire color code 377, and 377 is orange, purple, purple. And those were the same wires that came from that connector down there that I've been troubleshooting this whole time. Well, I went to see if they were connected together, and look at what we have here. We have a wire that's been cut between the top side of those two fuse blocks, and that is exactly where the orange, purple, purple wires go to. So what I did is I hooked up a clip lead between these 2 points on those two fuses, and let me show you what happened. So right now, I don't have the clip lead attached to those 2 points, and we're right where we started. The left flippers are working, the right flippers are not. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and hook up a clip lead between those 2 points. So with the clip lead attached, now I'm gonna go do the same exact thing. I'm gonna hit the left flippers, now I'm gonna hit the right. And look at that. That is our problem right there. There was a wire between those 2 points on the fuse blocks that has been cut for whatever reason. So we have a missing wire between those points. So once I solder a little jumper wire between those two, that will fix the flipper problems. But I also figured out something else, because these two fuses are also for the two pop bumpers on the playfield, and one of those pop bumpers was not working. I decided to test that. And if I do the pop bumper that's right here, you can see it's working. And now if I do the second one, it's working as well. So this one wire caused 2 problems: the right flippers to not work and one of the pop bumpers to not work. So there we go. 2 problems solved with just that one wire. All right, I've done my little fix. Just that tiny little wire across the top of those 2 fuse holders. So let's go ahead and test the flippers and the bumpers and see if they work. All right, I went ahead and reassembled the game, put the lower playfield back in. So let's start it. And both flippers, both bumpers. So that one little wire fixed both of those issues. And after taking a look at the schematic some more, I realized that that whole miswiring situation that I talked about for this connector here wasn't actually a problem, because pins 10 and 13, those were 2 wires that I had swapped. They're connected together on this side, you can see right there. And the same goes for pins 11 and 12. They're both connected together. And all of these lines go to, if we take a look on the other page, all those lines are switch return lines. And so it doesn't matter which one they're connected to, because when the J8 side and the P8 side of the connector are connected together, they're both connected at the same time. So for those specific wires, 10 and 13 and 11 and 12, it doesn't matter if 11 and 12 are swapped and 10 and 13 are swapped. It will change absolutely nothing about the machine. And so Gottlieb must have wired it that way from the factory with those pins being swapped, but it doesn't matter because they're both connected together anyway. So that actually wasn't a problem. The only problem affecting the flippers and the bumpers was that one missing little jumper wire. So that problem is fixed. What I want to do now is fix the trapdoor problem. And I think I have an idea as to why the door doesn't go down all the way and the coil buzzes. I was looking at the spring for this coil here, and as you can see, it's been replaced, and I looked up the correct part number for the coil that's supposed to be here, and it is correct, so I know the coil isn't the issue. But when I was pushing the mechanism down, when I do this, the spring tension on this feels very tight. And if I go ahead and look at a different coil up here, you can see the spring is a lot looser. The spring is noticeably tighter, and if I move the mechanism here, this feels a lot looser. And so what I think the issue is when this coil tries to energize, the spring tension is tight enough to where it'll want to pull back around halfway. And so that's why the coil is buzzing, and that's why even when I push the door down manually, it still doesn't stay down. So I'm going to remove this little bracket here. It's got 2 screws holding it on. And I'm going to pull the plunger out of this coil, and I'm going to replace the spring with one that is looser. And I'll also go ahead and grease up the mechanism a bit, because I see there is a grease point right there where there's metal to metal. So I'm going to make that feel smoother. So I'm going to put in a new spring in there, and we'll see if that fixes our issue. All right, the assembly is now back together, and you'll notice that there's no spring in there this time. I left it out because I don't think this mechanism had a spring to begin with, because it's already got this spring and it's pretty tight. You can see it still rebounds back nice and easily. And so it didn't make sense for there to be a spring here. So I don't think it came from here. It must have come from somewhere else in the machine, because as you can see, it's had a coil replaced here. This one's been replaced. This one's been replaced. That one's been replaced. And there's at least one on the lower playfield that's been replaced. So someone may have swapped the spring into a spot where it wasn't supposed to be. So I left the spring out. I went ahead and put some grease on the metal to metal points in there so it can slide nice and free, as well as the joint here. I put some lubricant in that, and now it's nice and free. But when I was under here, I wanted to take a look at the rear drop target assembly on the upper playfield to see why it wasn't resetting. And I noticed that there would be some times where this mechanism actually did try to reset. It was just having a really hard time. The targets would go up real slow and then back down, almost as if the mechanism was bound up. So I went ahead and felt the little reset bracket under here that's attached to the reset coil, and it was super gummed up. Like, I wasn't able to move it like this before. It was so hard to move. So what I did is I sprayed some lubricant in the metal to metal joints on the 2 sides of that bracket, and that freed it up immensely. This feels really smooth now. And this whole mechanism is going to come apart eventually, because I'm going to do a full drop target replacement in this game, because this one broke, and so they're probably all really brittle, and so it's a matter of time before the rest of them break. So when I take this mechanism apart, I will get in there and really clean it out. I just wanted to spray some lubricant in there for now just to make it work, and I think it's going to work now. So let's go ahead and put the playfield back down, and we'll test the drop targets as well as the coil assembly for the trapdoor. All right, I'm going to start the game and watch the rear drop targets. There they go. I could still see that I was having a bit of a hard time. They didn't come up as fast as they should have, so Obviously, when I take this apart and replace the targets, I'll give it a real clean. So now let's go ahead and test the trapdoor. So I'm going to roll down this switch. Let's see if it goes down and stays down. There we go. That is how it should work. No buzzing, and the door is all the way down. And so what that allows you to do is shoot the ball, and it'll go down into the basement, and then the door should close again. There we go. The ball went down, and it's all good. So that is the trapdoor fully working, and the drop target's working a lot better. Okay, so they are working pretty good now. So they should be coming up a little faster than that. So when that comes apart, when I service the upper playfield, I'll give that a real deep clean, and then that should work nice again. And so that is going to be part 1 for the Gottlieb Haunted House. There's still plenty of work to do on this machine. We still have to go behind the back box and fix everything back there, take a look at the boards and see if anything needs to be serviced. I need to rejuvenate the displays because, as you can see, they're getting a little bit dim, some of them, and I'll show you how to do that pretty quickly. We need to tune up some switches. There's still some switches that aren't quite working right, but we kind of got the major issues fixed. The flippers, the drop targets, and the trapdoor. Those were the big things I wanted to get working, but there's still plenty more we have to do. We have a whole back box and 3 separate playfields to take apart and fully service. So look forward to part 2 when we start doing some of that, and I will see you in my next video.